Hi, and welcome to the Hunting Illinois podcast. With us today, we have Dan Stevens.
Hello.
Curtis Twellman.
Hi.
And I'm Jason Buckley. So today we're going to be talking about our goals for the season and kind of what we want to get out of it, and kind of what we all have different ways that it's not just about going out and harvesting meat all the time, and we just kind of want to grow as hunters. So we're going to kind of cover what we might want to work on or what we're looking forward to in this season as we get going here. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about the hunting report. So we're going to go over what's going on in the woods and the different seasons going on right now. So with that, Dan, you want to go over the deer report?
Yeah, sure. So obviously deer season has really, it's kicked off. It's been a little bit of an interesting year, to say the least. It's been, a few degrees cooler on average than it is, historically. I think, in terms of the 5-year average, we're about 2 to 3 degrees below that for the week of October 9th. So the week we're recording this. So it's a little bit cooler than usual. I personally haven't done a ton of deer hunting yet, and I'll kind of get into why in a little bit. I have been running my trail cameras quite regularly and not seeing the kind of activity I normally expect to see this time of year. And I think a lot of that is just due to the way the current landscape in Illinois looks. If you look at the amount of corn that is still standing across much of the state, it is quite substantial compared to, again, where we normally are this time. So I kind of follow the USDA Illinois office puts out some really good, what they call crop progress reports that kind of look at where we stand this week as opposed to, annual averages and last year. And what I found very intriguing and a little bit upsetting, now, October 9th in 2021, about 53% of the corn had been harvested. This year, October 9th, we're at about 27%. So we still have a ton of standing corn that has not been harvested like it normally is in years past. And if you look at the 5-year average, it's about 43%. So we're still, obviously well below where we were last year, but well below that 5-year average. And I think my trail cameras are starting to show that quite a bit. Deer have this ability to basically live their entire day in standing corn. It's got plenty of moisture, plenty of water, whether, it's standing puddles of water to drink. They can also get it, obviously get water from that morning dew, and they also can get substantial moisture content just from eating that corn. So they've got food, cover, and water. I mean, they really don't need much else. And so I expect as we see this corn harvest start to pick up steam a little bit, obviously, across much of Illinois, a lot of the corn was planted late. And so I think we're just kind of seeing the effects of that. So I imagine the next week or two, we'll probably start seeing a larger portion of the, total corn production being harvested. And that's when I really start focusing on my hunting efforts. A lot of the public land I hunt here in central Illinois, and I know Jason and Curtis have hunted these areas too, they're surrounded by a lot of big ag fields. One in particular is basically a little, isolated pocket of timber of a couple thousand acres surrounded by nothing but, just full sections of corn. So once all that starts to get harvested, I think we'll start to see the deer shift back towards the timber. Obviously, I know we talked about it a few weeks ago on the podcast during the squirrel hunting report. We were a little curious and a little cautious about what the mast crop would look like this year, both hickories as well as acorns. And it seems like, even though we had some drought-like conditions across much of the state, it seems like we're still going to get a pretty decent acorn harvest. I have a couple oak trees above my house, and last night we had quite a bit of wind, and it sounded like it was hailing for most of the night, just the amount of acorns that were just consistently dropping. So I think we're going to have a decent acorn crop this year. So again, I imagine those deer, as the harvest continues, the corn harvest continues, they're going to start shifting, into their more kind of natural, or what we envision is natural, patterns and ranges, being a little bit more forest interior, focusing on some of those, big, thick stands of timber. But again, I haven't personally been out a ton, just because I've been watching a lot of this corn harvest, and for me, that's kind of my biggest kind of hang up with a lot of the public land, and a lot of that's just because of where I hunt. I'm surrounded by big corn, so you gotta have to pay attention to that. But I know you've been out a few times, Jason.
Yeah, I've only actually gotten out once so far.
Okay.
I've wanted to
Also,
go
you're
out
one for
more.
one.
I know. Yeah, one for one. I got a turkey. But uh, but yeah, well, that was a full day. So we went out in the morning and then we went back out in the afternoon. Yeah, it was a morning hunt. It would have been the Monday after opener, so probably the third, probably. And we heard once, probably smelled our walk in. So we were sitting there, and I was hunting with a mentee that I have. His name's Ed, and we got snorted at. So it was probably around 6:30 or so. We got snorted at, but so that was a bummer. But they were out there, but didn't see any. And then when we were scouting before that, where we hunt, if you're hunting with someone who doesn't like to sit, which Ed might be one of those people, he doesn't mind walking very slowly, and Curtis too. And so we were going to go and walk around some of the ag fields at this public land that we hunt all the time, and they have some soybean out right now. And we've had success before. You might not get a shot at a deer, but at least you'll see one. And some people that might be good enough. So we're going and walking around, and that's when we stumbled into some turkeys, and we were able to get a turkey out of the flock that we broke up when we came around the corner. But when we were scouting, I mean, we walked around and we had two doe within 20 yards of us. We came around one of the tight corners and they were standing right on the trail. So it can work, but I usually tend to sit in one spot, and hopefully the deer walk past me more than me walking up on them. And I'm not used to quite that spot and stalk style yet, but it is pretty fun though. I mean, when it works out, it's going to be fun.
Sure. No, that was a cool turkey you got. He looked quite big, had a nice looking beard.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm lucky. I'm 6'4", so I could see over some grass when we were walking down. Walking down, there's some real tall grass, and I could see little white heads through the grass, and they were in the cut part of the field. And Ed had no idea they were there, and I was like, "Dude, turkey, turkey!" And then we quick squatted, and then three of them went into there's grass, and then there was an open field, and then there was tree line between the mowed path we were on and the rest of the field around the corner. And the turkey moved into the tree line. Three of them did, and I didn't think they saw us yet. And one of the straggling turkeys was walking behind them, and I was trying to make up ground. Like, we were kind of crouched down, and I realized I need to do stretching more because I can't crouch like I used to already, which is disturbing. I'm only 34, but I wasn't the most flexible person in the world, crouching down with a bow in my hand. So we're trying to crouch down behind that grass, work our way up to them. And then luckily, actually, that one turkey that was straggling saw us and then peeled off and made a bunch of noise and ran back out into the field that it came from and into the taller grass. And that made the other turkeys not know what was going on. So they all kind of spread out, not knowing what was there. And then the turkey I shot was trying to call everybody back together. And that's a strategy I think that's mentioned a lot in our turkey classes, where you break up, especially in the fall, because they want to be together in a flock. You break them up, and then they call each other to come back, and that's when you get the kiki run going. And that's the "I'm lost, come find me" type of call. So you can look up what that sounds like. But this turkey was calling to try to find his buddies, and I moved up and just stayed close to the higher grass on that side of the trail. And then it came around the corner, and as soon as it was a clear shot around the corner, I didn't give it a chance to see me because I was pretty much in the open, and I was able to make a fantastic shot on this bird, and it went maybe 10 yards and fell over. And
Nice.
yeah, so, and it's a big tom. I mean, I saw it was a tom, but I didn't see how big of a tom it was, but it was a nice sized tom for sure. But yeah, there's another podcast back called The Birthday Bird, and I talk about how
Oh yeah.
it took me and Adam 6 days to shoot my first Illinois turkey. I've gotten turkey in Pennsylvania before, but not in Illinois. But it took us 6 days. This one took me 40 minutes. So it doesn't feel quite the same, but it's going to be a memory I have for a while, because just how, I mean, it was just luck. I mean, it honestly was not, it was luck and some skill of sneaking that I still have, but mainly luck.
Nice.
Thanksgiving at Jason's house.
You bet.
Yep.
I
Oh, it's
I did have an experience like that too a few years ago, that busting up the flock of turkeys in the fall. That's a great, because normally when I'm archery hunting, I'm deer hunting, but I always make sure and get the archery turkey tag if the state is available, because it's like an opportune moment. And that's how it happened. I'm walking out to my deer stand, and just a big flock of turkeys, I don't know, 40, 50, busted them. They went everywhere. And then I just sat right down, and about, I don't know, it was only maybe less than 10 minutes. They started doing that. Yeah, like the first part of the key run call. just a lost bird call, and they all just started congregating back around me. But that also makes it really tough to draw a bow when
Mm.
it's more than one, because I had like, I don't know, like 15 come into my sight at the same time, and so they saw me, I took a shot, I missed. It was one of two turkeys I've missed with my bow. But that a really fun hunting strategy, and if anybody out there is archery hunting deer, make sure you get the turkey tag too if it's available, because you might luck into an awesome hunt like that. And Jason, luck, skill, I don't think there's any difference between them. It's just if you spend time outdoors, cool stuff happens, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, whatever you want to call it, luck, skill, you got a bird. We'll be over there for Thanksgiving. Who's making them potatoes and the stuff? I don't know, but
I've got potatoes in the garden that are ready, so I can
awesome.
handle
There you go.
potatoes.
We're halfway there.
Yeah.
I ate them already, just so you guys. I'm sorry. I still got his legs. We can make a pulled turkey appetizer for Thanksgiving or something like that. But yeah,
There you go.
They're already nuggets.
Right. Next one.
But yeah, so the deer are out moving around, but not like you said. Just I've only seen them in the evenings really, and then in the morning I got blown at. But
yeah, the next week or two are really when we're going to start seeing things ramp up. Again, I haven't been out yet, been running cameras. I plan on probably not this weekend, but next weekend I'll really start, hammering down and probably hit the woods. But again, and I think it kind of lends itself to what Curtis just brought up. The fact that just being out there, you're going to see cool stuff. The more you're out there, the cooler stuff you're going to see. And that's a big thing in my hunt planning process, is ensuring that I don't kind of waste my time to some extent, but also hunting is exhausting. I don't care what people think, but even just deer hunting, sitting in a tree stand for 5 or 6 hours, every sense is on overload. You're hyper focused. It's exhausting, and it's pretty easy to burn yourself out. And so that's kind of why I have shifted my efforts a little bit later in October, just to again allow me the best opportunity when I have the time, when I'm not bored yet, or I'm not getting over hunting or getting burnt out. It's still kind of fresh when I can kind of time it right with the breeding behavior pre-rut. So should start getting good here very soon.
Samesies here, man. That, other than the weather matching up well with being able to hang deer, like I really wait to go out when I think the pre-rut activity is really starting to peak late October, because I don't get a ton of time to go out and hunt. And like I personally prefer duck hunting and trapping and squirrel hunting and the things that provide more action, but I really like to eat deer. So I start going out at the peak time, and hopefully I get a deer before I get burned out and want to do something with more action, and that allows me to move around, because sometimes the solitude of the woods is great, but it's like after 2 hours, man, I'm looking around, I'm like, oh man, I want to walk over there and see what's going on. It's tough to sit in one place for so long. So yeah, I don't want to get burned out, so I try to start when the getting's good. That's just my strategy. Good time to squirrel hunt right now.
You bet.
yeah, I'm trying to learn that. In the past, I've definitely burned myself out. I would go out every chance I had, and then by the time the getting was good, I'd be like, oh man, it's rut. I gotta get out there. But I've already set like it's way too much already. So yeah, there's
and you have this list of to-dos at home that you got to get done, and that you just kept putting off and putting off. Yeah.
Yep. For sure.
So but with that,
I'm trying to get better at it. I have this year. I find the least this year, I think, than the past 5 years. So
I would agree with that. Yeah, normally by like this time last year, you'd probably already had 5 or 6 full sits under your belt at this point.
Yeah, I like it. I do like being out in the woods.
No, I mean, and that's the cool thing about hunting, is everyone's got their own way of doing things.
For sure. Yeah. If you can use it as a good meditation, like that's awesome. And I love to do that. It's just my problem is it's like 2 hours is my limit. And really, like deer hunting, you should sit for about 4 hours. So it's like those last 2 hours to me, it's like, it's like, making the kid eat Brussels sprouts or something. It's like, I guess I'll do it. But I really want to walk over there.
Yeah. All right, Dan, what other species you got? Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got kind of a quick upland report. Obviously, upland season hasn't officially kicked off yet, but it'll kick off here in the next few days, few weeks, depending on what species we're looking at. But I'm really going to focus on kind of basically just pheasant, quail, and rabbit, and just talk a little bit about kind of the outlook. Obviously, we don't have a real official hunting report yet. Haven't been out. Season's not open, but there's a lot that we can look at in terms of climate and weather, particularly in the winter and in the spring that can really impact winter mortality and also in the spring impact nesting success. So obviously the winter of 21 and 22 is kind of relatively mild compared to some previous years. So winter mortality for pheasants and quail was probably fairly low, at least in terms of kind of annual averages. Again, there's areas that will probably hit a little bit harder if they got more snowfall than other areas. But I would say in general, I think we had probably a pretty low mortality for both pheasants, quail, and rabbits to some extent during the winter. Just again, it was relatively low, relatively mild. Now in the spring, a little different issue. Early spring was great. We didn't have a ton of rainfall. In fact, most areas, especially in early spring, were kind of drought stricken to some extent. Luckily, a lot of the birds had kind of previously nested before we really started to see some of these bigger rainfall events that started in kind of June, July. We started to see some very localized areas. I know, we in Champaign here had one day where we had like 5 inches of rain. Chicago got just dumped on in a matter of a day or two and had really bad flooding. So those localized events probably impacted some areas. But luckily, the kind of peak of the nesting season had already kind of come and gone by a lot of that localized rainfall. So I think we're going to have a pretty decent season for both pheasant and quail. Now, pheasant, I know IDNR recently did their summer surveys, and they actually did see a slight uptick. I think it was 5 to 6% over their typical kind of yearly average. So that kind of lends credence to we had a low winter mortality, decent nesting success. So chances are there's going to be quite a bit of birds on the landscape this year, but we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Now, quail, they are kind of their own unique beast to some extent. Obviously, in Illinois, they don't cover, geographically the entirety of the state. They're really more localized in kind of southern Illinois. That's kind of their home range. We really don't even get them up here in central Illinois. We'll occasionally find some, but a lot of those are kind of left over from dog trials or something like that. But there's been a lot of significant late winter storms in southern Illinois for the past several years. And I think we're starting to see that impact the quail population. I know that IDNR puts out kind of a quail status report, and it was fairly low again. So just kind of keep that in mind. Not a ton of quail opportunity, but pheasant looks good. Quail will probably start to rebound if we get some decent, winter, especially in southern Illinois. But obviously, it can take a few years, especially after we had 4 or 5 years of really bad kind of southerly Illinois winter storms that kind of came through with ice and rain. Those can really wreak havoc on bobwhite populations, especially because they are so reliant on woody cover. And unfortunately, a lot of the habitat has been, just removed or degraded to the point that woody vegetation that they need to survive these winter storms is just not present anymore. Now, moving on to rabbit, statewide trends show that rabbit numbers are down a little bit from last year. They actually use a roadkill index, which is kind of a cool way to not necessarily estimate a population, but just to look at population level over time. And so they use what we call a population index, where we can compare a specific value year over year and just see what that trend is doing. So again, not an estimation, but looking at that overall trend. And the way they do it for rabbits is roadkill index. So this year's roadkill index was 6% lower than 2021, with 1.69 rabbits per 1,000 miles traveled. So not a ton of good news there. And again, a lot of that is indicative of habitat as well. Rabbits thrive in a lot of the same areas that quail and pheasant do, especially in areas that are kind of on the fringe, that have really good, thick vegetative cover, thick woody vegetation. And we're just, losing a lot of that habitat kind of year over year. So rabbits are trending down. Now, you can certainly still get on good rabbit hunts, especially if you find the areas, that have good habitat, that have brush piles, that have some of this more thicker vegetation. You can certainly find them, but year over year, they did trend a little bit down this year.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, not a lot of good news, but I mean, that's what happens. Populations are
Yeah,
very cyclical.
Yeah, and just
absolutely.
talking about mammal populations, you mentioned this word trend a couple times, and this is just a really good segue. In my opinion, the best way to monitor any wildlife population is through trends, as many as possible. And there's a lot of different methods. A lot of states will plug in a bunch of different numbers into a model, and that spits out a number plus or minus. And those are great, but they largely get lost on the public because they're hard to defend. Like, where did you get this from? Where did you get that from? Whereas trends are easy. A roadkill survey. We've had more roadkill this year, therefore we think there's more rabbits.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we do a track survey. There's more tracks there. We think there's more rabbits. Also, we track nuisance complaints. Those have gone up. So all of those trends together make for, yeah, you may not be able to say how many rabbits are in Illinois, but you can say the population is stable, going up or down. And that's my favorite way to do it. A lot of states differ in how they do it, but anyway, a little sidetrack into trends, but just since you mentioned it,
No, that's good. And in the show notes, so a lot of this kind of information that I kind of put together, we'll kind of have links down in the show notes of the podcast, or if you're watching this through YouTube, in the description. So DNR does put out these what they call Upland status reports. So they have a pheasant report, a quail report, and a rabbit report that kind of dives a little bit further into kind of what we talked about here today. So if you want to look into that, check the show notes down below, and you can go visit those reports.
Cool. All right, Chris, you got anything on waterfowl?
Yes, waterfowl. So we're in a little bit of a lull here, depending on when you listen to this podcast, but we are getting ready to get into the waterfowl season. So Illinois is split into 4 zones, right? We got the North Zone, Central Zone, South Central Zone, and the South Zone. So there's a nice little map available in the Hunting Digest. You're going to need to look at that and figure out where you are, because all the dates are different depending on what zone you're in. But it starts, of course, in the North Zone, since ducks migrate north to south. We all know that. October 22nd is when they get to start for ducks and geese other than white-fronted geese. Central Zone, October 29th. South Central's November 12th. And then the Southern Zone, you got to wait all the way till December 3rd. So they've got a little while to wait, but then, of course, their season goes later. And that's the beginning of the duck and goose season for everything except for white-fronted goose is not open for the first couple days in the North and the Central. So a little bit of confusing thing there in the regs. That's just how the feds make them split up the seasons and how they fall, but no shooting white fronts, which a lot of people call speckle bellies, the first couple days in the North and the Central.
I don't think I've ever seen them here that early anyhow, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a migratory, so we don't have resident populations of them, so usually got to wait for the weather, so not an issue anyway. But for the duck limits this year, no surprises. It's pretty much as usual. 4 mallards, including no more than 2 hen mallards. You can have 3 wood ducks. You can have 2 scaup for the first 45 days of the season, and then 1 for the last 15 days. 2 redheads, 2 canvasbacks, 2 black ducks, 1 pintail, and 1 mottled duck. And that's the daily bag limit. Total ducks is 6. Can't include any more than those splits that I just said. And then your possession limit is 3 times the daily bag. And that also means for all of the splits. So you can have 2 redheads, but your possession limit of redheads is 6. So if you get 6, you got to eat them before you can get another one, because in your freezer is your possession limit. So keep that in mind, guys and girls. Let's see. Now our last count by the Forbes count has been a while ago. It was on 9/22. So my guess is they're going to fly this week. Maybe they're flying today. I don't know. So there will be a new count posted real soon. But back on 9/22, we were at about 78% total ducks for the 10-year average. So a little bit low, but not super low. The only species of duck that was below the 10-year average on that count was blue-winged teal, just slightly above. below across the board. That was including non-waterfowl like cormorants and pelicans were far below. So a lot of the migrations really aren't going yet, and really a lot of these ducks don't stick to Illinois very long, like especially the early migrators like blue-winged teal. They're here for a few days and then off they go, and then they're in Mexico or who knows, even further south. So not too much of a surprise. We know there's a lot of drought conditions across much of the prairie pothole region, which is the duck factory. So the migration this year is supposed to be in general down. But for a place like Illinois, our habitat is good. So if we have water to fill that habitat, we're going to have a lot of food there. And on the flight days, it's going to be good. It's a migratory animal. So unlike quail, where you can say, yeah, there's low numbers, hunting's going to be low and it's going to stay low. With ducks, the good thing is there's always brighter days ahead. I think that's one of the things why I really like them is you might go out hunting first couple days of the season and yeah, it's a bummer, barely saw anything. But then you go out on a northwest wind day and you know, just absolutely are covered up in them. So that's the beauty with ducks in Illinois. There's always more coming. And well, I'm anxious to see what this next count that should be done in the next few days, or at least within the next couple weeks, shows.
Awesome.
Getting exciting.
Yes. And that's really all I got for waterfowl, 'cause no real seasons are going on now. But remember, report those bands. That's important to get a good idea of how the population's doing. And then I'll also mention trapping and fur bear hunting opens on November 10th as well. So we got a few weeks for that, but we here at the Learn to Hunt program, we're going to be getting into some trapping workshops this winter. So keep an eye out for those, and maybe some fur bear hunting ones too. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, we're going to be getting more into that, and the time is almost here for that as well.
That's right. Yep. And we have our waterfowl workshop this Saturday. And so I'll be putting this up as quickly as I can here. So if you're listening to this week, Saturday, the 15th. Yep. So Saturday 15th, you can go to our website and see if you can still register for that. If you're missing our events and want to make sure you don't miss one going forward, go to our website and sign up for our monthly newsletter. And that way you'll be alerted to all of our scheduling and all the different events and webinars that we have for you guys, and you won't miss one ever again. So
that waterfowl workshop's gonna be fun. It's at Chautauqua National Wildlife Refuge, not too far away from Peoria, and we're gonna do some advanced ID with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff. It's gonna be, even advanced waterfowlers are gonna learn something from that, I promise you. And special surprise, everybody's getting a free duck call, so we're all going to make all kinds of noises and ruckus, and they may not let us come back, but we are doing it this time, and everybody gets a duck call, so come on out on Saturday.
No, for sure. And I'll just go through our events that we have posted right now, just so in case you're wondering. So yeah, so we have the waterfowl event October 15th. Then we have some webinars scheduled. So we're going to cover small game hunting on Thursday, October 20th. And that's going to be a daytime webinar between 11 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. So if you got time during your lunch, you can pop in for that. And again, if you are interested in getting the webinar but can't make it, register, and then we'll send you a recording for the webinar. Then we have, this is going to be a fun one because it's remote scouting and wild game tasting. So this is going to be an event, and we're having this for the first time here on campus. So we're going to try to see how many people we can actually get to come to us instead of us having to travel around the state. So come on out to Champaign, Illinois on Saturday, October 22nd. And we can try some game out and go over some remote scouting and do some hands-on map reading and seeing where we can pick out some bedding area and where to go and how to set up. That's some of the harder parts of hunting if you're just getting into it. So
yeah, and we kind of made that event, really unique in that we're, developing some interactive activities where, instead of it's not going to be just us up at a PowerPoint talking the whole time. It's going to be interactive. We're going to have stuff laid out, maps everywhere. We're going to go over map reading, and like Jason said, we're going to have some decent wild game there to taste. So come on out, be good.
Yep. Yeah, these guys are
That's
some
one
good
of the
cooks.
more like we get a lot of questions about that, remote scouting. So it's a super popular topic in the hunting world, and it's something we can all learn more about. And
Hmm.
I mean, that's something just we in general, not even just hunters, but I think people in general in today's world, everybody should know how to read a map, and we're not very good at it. So we could always practice, and that's going to be a good excuse to do it. And yeah, like Dan said, hands-on stuff, which is the way to learn. So come prepared to be interactive at that one. And there's food.
Yeah, I mean, it's another
Yeah,
level
yeah.
of the hunting process that you can get satisfaction from. I think is being able to look at a map and being like, okay, I using everything I know now from listening to us talk or from what you've picked up over the years, and thinking about how deer use the landscape, and being able to look at a map and be like, all right, I think they're going to be here. And then when you go out, boots on the ground, to see if you were right or not, and then you were. I mean, it's a cool feeling to be like,
I'll
holy
tell
cow,
you,
I
I'm
know what
pretty
I'm.
sure I have friends that plan hunts just so they can do that.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
yeah, months ahead of time, looking at maps and aerial photos and planning it out. And if you think about it, the hunt might only last 5 days, but you can do that every evening for 6 or 8 weeks. So it's
Right.
yeah, if that's something you enjoy, and I think it's something we enjoy.
Mhm.
Um, like yeah, you can get a lot of recreation from that, which is just leading up to the hunt. So really cool, fun stuff.
Mhm. No, it's fun. And then a couple more webinars to finish off the month here. So then we have duck hunting strategies and techniques. That's going to be a webinar we have
Ooh.
Tuesday, October 25th. And then we have rut hunting strategies and techniques right before rut, or even during the real pre-rut and rut starting off here October 27th. So another webinar there. So if you're interested in those, come on out and sign
Yeah,
up.
stuff should be happening for that one. So we should be
Yeah,
have some good up to date information.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
right about the time I like to start, October
Same.
27th.
All right. So with that, and what you guys like to do or what you're looking forward to this season, we're going to talk a little bit about our goals for the year and kind of
Hmm.
how we want to improve and what we're looking at for this coming season. So Dan, would you like to start off?
Sure, yeah, and kind of the reason we kind of developed this idea, I think, especially if you look at a lot of the hunting commentary, whether it's the industry, whether it's some of these influencers, a lot of it focuses on the harvest, right? And while that's important, there's a lot of goals that I personally have, and I know you guys have just from us talking for several years. We all have distinct goals that don't even relate necessarily to a harvest, and so this was kind of our idea to talk about our personal goals for the season. I'll probably give out two and we'll kind of just leave it for there. And the cool thing is we'll be able to, touch base on these as the season progresses. Were we able to meet these goals? Did we run into any big challenges? And just kind of, walk through our thought process, walk through our strategic, decisions to help us achieve that goal. So I think it'll be a really cool conversation. And again, it's not always about the harvest. Like certainly that's why we're out there. That's the purpose of hunting, is to harvest an animal, get the meat from it. But you can have all these other tertiary goals that focus on the experience or focus on who you're going with and things like that. So I'll kind of start off with my first goal. I have two golden retrievers. One of them is fairly trained well for a pheasant dog. This was actually her first wild pheasant right here. My other dog just turned or will be turning 2 years in a few months. So one of my big goals this year is to get her on wild pheasants. I have through our training, I have no doubt she'll be able to find controlled pheasants and kick those up and flush them well. But the wild pheasant, challenges me a little bit more so than necessarily her. She'll still be able to do her thing. She knows what to do on birds. But for me, I didn't have very much luck finding or securing a lottery permit for some of these areas that hold lots of wild birds like Sibley or Saybrook. Didn't have any luck there. So it's going to take a lot of kind of outside research and scouting to try to find some areas that I may be able to get on a couple wild birds. And so that's kind of one of my big goals. Is obviously I love working with my dogs, love watching the dogs, but being able to put up a wild pheasant is kind of one of my big goals for the year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. What's your other one? Or do you want to go
Yeah.
around?
Whatever you guys want. Yeah.
Well,
You want to
all
go,
right.
I did
Curtis?
have one question for you though, Dan.
Sure.
So can you tell people what are ways that somebody can tell a bird if it's wild or if it was captive reared and then released? Are there things
That's a
people
great
can look
question.
for?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the big distinctions is the length of the tail. Particularly pheasants who have been raised in pens, they historically are in areas where the pen is just kind of bare dirt. There's a lot of birds stacked in a one particular area, so there's a lot of fighting going on. Their tails are constantly dragging over this dirt, where your typical kind of wild pheasant has this nice kind of long tail that's elongated and pretty. For me, it's not necessarily what the bird looks like that's kind of driving this kind of goal or achievement. For me, it's just the idea of being able to listen. In Central Illinois, it is hard to find wild birds to hunt, whether it's pheasants, dove. I mean, dove you can certainly find. Quail, we really don't have. And so, again, we have some decent controlled pheasant areas around. But for me personally, I really want to focus on kind of that wild hunt where I get to go out with the dog, probably spend 5 or 6 hours to maybe flush one rooster if we're lucky. But again, I think it challenges both her and me to try to find these areas, find areas that hold wild birds rather than where they go out and release them that morning. So for me, it's not necessarily about what the bird looks like. That I'm kind of that's not necessarily the reason. It's more so about kind of the story and kind of the feeling of being able to achieve this.
And then are you looking at how are you going to research to see where there are wild birds at if it's not one of these sites that you have to win a lottery for to go to that's managed by the DNR strictly for pheasants that do have wild birds on it? I mean, there's other sites that you bump into a bird and it's a wild
Mm-hmm.
bird. Like I don't know if you want to talk about sites
For
specific.
me, my main kind of strategy right now is focusing on private land access. And so I've
Okay.
got a big plat map for Champaign County, which is where we live. I also bought one for Vermilion County, which is the county to the east of us. And so what I'm doing right now is just looking at a lot of satellite imagery and finding farmers who have CRP, which is Conservation Reserve Program. They're basically paid by the federal government to not farm it, but to convert it back into prairie grasses. Now, obviously, I can't just, from looking at a map, tell if they have birds there, but chances are if I run into pheasants on one of these private lands, chances are they're quote unquote wild birds. Most people don't do a lot of stocking because stocking is one of those things that there's a lot of research that shows those stocked birds do not survive. You're not really adding or bolstering the population. You're just putting them out there for somebody to go harvest them, and then they're basically removed right away. And of those that aren't harvested, very few will actually make it through winter, and even fewer will actually make it through, enough to be able to have, provide nesting opportunities or things like that. So that's kind of my main strategy is focusing on private land, looking at big ag that has a lot of CRP around it, or maybe an entire field, and then try to hit those landowners up.
Well, if you don't wind up getting one by the end of December as an alternate option, and I know this from being from Missouri and being a duck hunter, as soon as the duck season closes down, a lot of the waterfowl areas open up to pheasant hunting. And I know at least Bob Brown in the Northwest and then Grand Pass in the North Central, both of those are really good. I mean, good enough to be a destination. We used to go the day after duck season almost every year, and almost everybody's limiting out. There's a lot of birds, and yeah, it's a lot of fun to be had. They're all wild. Yeah, pretty fun. So if you don't get one,
that's cool.
Then we might be able to hit that up. And those are public
I
land
like it.
sites, so
I like it.
just got to drive.
Well,
put some miles.
yeah, I'll kind of go ahead and jump into my second goal here, and we can just kind of go that way. My second goal is a little more kind of abstract and one that probably most people won't have a similar goal. But for me, it's harvest a deer, to do the tanning process of the hide myself, and then either construct something for that hide, or what I might do is just send it out to somebody who can take that hide that I've now tanned from the deer I harvested and turn it into gloves. That's kind of my goal. I grew up with a grandfather who was in the Navy, and he took me my first hunting trip when I was probably 13, and I got to wear his old buckskin gloves. And just having those buckskin gloves while you're out deer hunting, there was just always that kind of cool connection for me there, and I just kind of want to recreate that. So that's a big goal for mine, is just to harvest a deer, whether it's doe, buck, I really don't care. Get the hide, tan it myself, and then get it shipped off to try to make some cool gloves out of it.
For sure. That's awesome. Like anytime you can make clothing or equipment that has a story like that, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
how awesome is that? Because we put on gloves all the time. No, no, you never think about it, but every
Never think
single
twice.
time
Right.
you would put those gloves on, you would think about that whole hunt. You would think about the whole tanning process. You'd think about almost cutting your thumb off when you slipped. All of that stuff, and it would all be good memories because time
Yep.
heals all wounds.
Yeah, I like it. And again, that's kind of why I have so many different, antlers and taxidermy. Obviously it's for me, it's not so much about the trophy. It is every animal up here has, these aren't my biggest deer, but they have a story behind them. And so I can, when I reflect on things, I can instantly remember what that deer looked like walking through the woods. What, me and my dad were whispering back and forth to each other. And the gloves are another kind of option to do that with. So I'm looking forward to it and quite excited about it, to be honest.
Cool. No, it's awesome. And then yeah, you also can think about your grandpa too, and about how it was
Yeah,
those
exactly.
gloves he
Yeah,
had and
yeah.
everything else. Yeah, awesome. Curtis, what are the goals and stuff that you want to work on this year?
All right, yeah. So my first one, same goal I have every year, and it's just a reminder, kind of a reminder, like a check for myself to basically say that every time you go out in the woods as a hunter, as a trapper, as any type of outdoors person, you are a representative of all of them. So I want to remind myself to be ethical, to be legal, to be basically everything that you think your grandfather and Fred Bear and anybody who might be a mentor to you would be good with, remember that and take time at the beginning of the season to think through that. Because yeah, like once you let a shot fly, you can't take it back. So I like
No,
to think of all that before, and it just reminds me to be patient. It reminds me that as a human, we should be the most ethical hunters in the woods. And I think that we are when we're firing on all 8 cylinders. So we just got to remember to do that. And that just kind of talking through that helps me to remember when that time comes and I might be tempted. Oh, I can still make that shot, and then I remember like, yeah, but I may not. And it's not worth the chance because I might go hunting tomorrow and that same deer is going to be 6 steps closer, and I will thank my lucky stars that I didn't take the shot the day before,
yep.
more often than not. So that's kind of the same goal I have every year. And I try to give myself a pep talk like Michael Jordan in Space Jam at the beginning of each hunting season. And,
Get your secret juice.
you're right. Yeah, yeah. Space Jam with Michael Jordan. That's the secret sauce right there. I used to watch that before baseball games, hit home runs all the time. Like, it's all MJ. It's all
I
MJ.
just, I'm just imagining Curtis in his car right before he leaves to go into the woods on YouTube, just watching the Space Jam clip of Mel Jordan. Like, all right, Curtis, you got this.
Oh no, I just got the soundtrack downloaded. I
There
got
you
the
go.
movie memorized, so if I have the soundtrack, I can fill in the rest.
No, that's awesome.
That's my first goal. My second goal has to do with ducks, because like you guys know, when I was in college, I big time duck hunter. I was even a duck hunting guide. I got at around or over 100 ducks a year for a lot of years there, and it was awesome. Limits all the time, so fun. Tired by the end of the season, all your joints hurt. Like I know I'm not going to be able to do it at that level, but my goal is to get into ducks multiple times this year. Last year, I went out to Nebraska, and me and my brother spent a day figuring them out and then a day laying them out, and limiting out. And so we had one good hunt, but that was the only good hunt I had last year. And so this year, I at least want to double that, hopefully triple or quadruple it. But I want to have 3 or 4 good duck hunts, which may definitely not mean limiting out, but it definitely means going out and having what you think is a good trip. So maybe that's just
Sure.
3 or 4 ducks, but you had lots of birds work. You had a lot of fun. You saw some cool stuff. So yeah, I really want to do that this year and get more in line with the duck hunting that I used to do. And so hopefully I can keep throttling that up. And so 2 or 3 years from now, I'll be back to the glory days. We'll see.
Nice. That's a good goal. I'm happy to help out with that as much as possible. So if you need another duck hunting partner.
Yes, you usually do. Duck hunting is good in 4 is usually like a good number, 3 or 4. It's easier to hide with smaller numbers of people,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
when you're on them, it's also kind of a bummer because I've had this where me and one other guy went hunting and it was really good. And then we're done in 30 minutes. And it's just kind of like, I kind of wish we had 2 more people because we probably could have got 2 more limits and stretched this hunt out. And
Yeah.
how do we wind up walking in and walking out 2 times longer than we spent hunting, which whatever, I'm not going to complain. But anyway, yeah, duck hunting, super fun, getting exciting just thinking about it. And not to mention, I love duck. I mean, deer is great because you get so much of it. But if I'm being honest, like squirrel and duck, I prefer to deer. I just do. I just have fewer of it because it's a much smaller animal. But
Mhm.
you're talking about some culinary critters right there. So learn how to make duck, and everybody will think you're an expert chef. And you can just go pluck them out of the sky and get yourself a gourmet meal every fall right here in the marshes of Illinois. And that's beautiful. That's awesome.
Add a little bit of fruit flavor to it, and you'll be.
The fruit
Mm.
sauces, yeah, even cranberry sauce, your Thanksgiving
Yeah, yeah.
cranberry sauce, yeah, you roast up a duck, put a little cranberry, goes really good with
Mhm.
any type of fruit, anything.
Yeah. No, duck is something
Nice.
different for sure. I love duck. Holy cow. So my goals, one we were already kind of alluded to already, and my one hunting goal is to hunt less. And I know it's a weird one. So yeah, I
Hunt
mean,
more
I was going out
strategically.
exactly. I was going sitting. I mean, since COVID, God, I mean, I don't
Efficiently.
even know. I lost count of
Yeah.
during 2020. I mean, I probably went out 30, 40 times during 2020 for counting a morning and an evening as a different hunt. And then ever since then, I probably went out maybe 20, 30 and last year a bunch of times. So I've already achieved it so far in October. I only went out for 2 sits. But yeah, so try to be more strategic, try to hone my time in more to the high priority hunts. Try to keep it towards rut and when deer are moving around and such. So that for sure. And then on top of that, I want to try to help people get deer this year more. I mean, I've been trying with Ed for the past 2 years. This is his 3rd year hunting. Ed actually had the same luck I had with the turkey, but last year, so he actually got his first fall turkey. That was the first thing he's ever harvested before. So we got a turkey last year, but I want to try to get him on some deer. And then we have the hunt camp winner that I'm taking out now, so he's going to get out around rut. So hopefully we get him on some deer, and I'll be getting out to try to hone in on where they're at. I already have a good idea, but make sure he has a successful hunt, at least see some deer for him. I don't even know if he's going to get one, but as long as he sees some, I'd be
Sure.
happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then my dad's coming out. I've been living in Illinois now for 8 years, and dad's coming out for a whole week, the first week of November. So I just
Oh,
want
he
that to
picked
go.
the right week.
Yeah, so just want that to go
Are you
well.
feeling pressure to deliver?
I'm trying not to. I'm
I
trying
can
not
see
to.
you
He
out
can
there
take
just
care.
running like a dozen cameras. You got like 6
No,
different stand locations, and that meme with like Charlie from Always Sunny, I can see you like
Oh,
explaining to
yeah,
your dad,
with the ropes
like,
and
we're
everything.
gonna hunt here because the wind's from the west and like blah, blah, blah,
No,
and there's swamp gas
listen,
and Venus.
I may educate people on how to hunt for a living, but if you think my dad's going to take my advice, I mean, I'll tell him some spots, but he'll look at a map and he'll be like, "All right, thanks, bud," and then he'll just walk off, and he'll come back with a wall hanger for sure. I mean, that's just what he does. The dude's crazy. I
Yep.
take him to hunt camps all the time, and he limits that afternoon. He showed up. He comes back with a buck, and we're like, "Really? Like you have 3
Some people
days,
got it.
dude? He's something else." So anyway, so he'll figure that out. But but I just want to have fun with him. So we'll have some fun. And then and also not take it as seriously. I think growing up, I took hunting very seriously, kind of going a little bit with what Curtis was saying, where it's a make or break every hunt, and it doesn't need to be. I want to try to have more fun. So hunt less, have more fun, and get people at least seeing some deer.
Love it.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, I guess that leaves time for critter trivia. First off, while we're still on the topic, this week's question is going to be, what are your goals as a hunter this year? So we just want to know if it's just getting your first deer, or trying to get the biggest deer you've ever gotten, or getting out and taking people with you, whatever you want. But we're interested in it. So if you can send that to us, you can comment on the video or email us, and we'd be happy to see what your guys' goals are this year. So last week's or I should say last episode's critter trivia question was, how many deer in archery season were taken with a crossbow last year? And because it has become legalized, so we're seeing what percentage is that, Dan?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we don't have 21 and 22 numbers yet. There are some issues with licensed vendors apparently from DNR. So those full reports are still not published yet. But looking at the 2020 to 2021, I think will still give us a pretty good idea. What I find really interesting is obviously, like you mentioned, crossbows just became legal, in the past few years. Historically, prior to that, the only way you could use a crossbow during kind of the standard archery season was to be of a certain age. I believe it was 65, or have some kind of medical disability and have kind of a doctor's note, in essence. But we saw that big shift to say, hey, no, that's dumb. Everybody can use one during archery season. And year over year, we're seeing a very substantial climb, from people switching from traditional and compound, switching over to crossbow. And I anticipate that's going to, continue for a few more years until it probably finds its kind of natural plateau. Hard to say what that'll look like, but as of right now, if you look at the total harvest from 2020 to 2021, the deer archery, there was 99,900 or 397 deer harvested. About 21%, 21.7% of those were crossbow. 24 were compound. So we're starting to see those really catch up. And I would imagine if we don't see it this year in 21, 20, or 22, 23, we'll probably definitely see it in 23, 24. I think we're going to see that flip where crossbow becomes more dominant than compound.
Wow. That's crazy. So, I mean,
Yeah.
and also, are they seeing, is that increasing new hunters too, Dan? I'm sorry to ask you questions that you might not have in front of you.
No, I got it. Yeah.
You got it. Yeah. So is that an increase? Are we getting more people coming into the sport now and utilizing crossbow, or are people just leaving their old bows at home and picking up the crossbow?
That's the more common. And so in Illinois, we have what I'll just, flat out say is an aging hunter population. Our average age of a hunter is, I think, about 57, and it basically goes up one every single year. It's just kind of the trend. So we have a very aging population. As people get older, it is hard to pull back a 60 to 70 pound bow. And so I think we're seeing that natural switch where people are like, I don't need to mess with that. My shoulders don't work as good as they used to. Let me pick up the crossbow, and I'm still out there hunting. So we're seeing a lot of that. Now there certainly is still a lot of new hunters who are coming in as first time licensed buyer who are going immediately into crossbow. But what I still find interesting, and we see it quite regularly at our workshops, is there's still a lot of people who love the idea of vertical bows. I mean, we've had a few. We were kind of emailing back and forth about it this morning, but we had a few of our 3D archery shoots where we kind of set up this hunting simulation. One of those, we had like one or two people come with compound bows. Every single other shooter was a traditional, whether it's a longbow or recurve. It was quite cool. And so I still think there's that kind of desired interest to use some of the more traditional archer equipment, but also compound. So it'll be interesting to see where those kind of final percentages eventually kind of nestle out at. But we're starting to see crossbows overtake compound, which is quite interesting.
Shooting a bow is fun. So I think there's
Oh,
always
it
going to
is.
be a lot of people that do it, because shooting a crossbow is not like shooting a bow. It's more like shooting a gun. It's a great tool because it gets people in the woods, and especially gets them out in the woods with equipment that they're proficient with, because it's far better for somebody to go out in the woods with a crossbow than to go out with their compound that they haven't touched since last year. And I'm just going to grab it and go hunting. It should be fine. Like, I would much rather those people grab a crossbow, but
Yeah.
the actual act of shooting a bow is super fun. And people that come out to our archery events, they all, they notice that, like, shooting a crossbow is easy, but shooting a vertical bow is fun. It's different.
Yeah. And I think you guys saw that at your event this past weekend. You had kind of a family outdoor day up at William Powers, and let a lot of people shoot archery equipment for the first time. And I think you guys made the comment that a few of them were asking for it for Christmas. So
Yeah, some little kids asking grandma right there.
And we had
That's
one
cool.
verified purchase from last year where a kid said that he shot a bow for the first time there, and then they got him one for Christmas after
Nice.
our event. I don't
Yeah,
know how
so I'm
often
not sure what sort of percentages Barnett or 10 Point pay, but we'll be watching for the check in the mail.
So there you go. So crossbows are definitely coming around, and people are using them. So that's it's interesting.
Yep.
It's gonna be interesting to follow that, and it does seem like it's coming across all facets. It's not just old people; it's the people getting into it. It's middle-aged folks. I mean, it's just kind of a easier tool to use.
I
And
mean, and we are all busy. Time is
yeah,
a huge constraint for literally everybody these days. And I mean, obviously, like we kind of hamper on, you still need to practice with crossbow, but that
yes,
level of practice and that consistency of practice, I would argue, is substantially lower.
yeah. And you should still not be taking shots over 40 yards, even with the
I,
crossbow, no
I
matter what
agree
you
with that
do,
too. Yeah.
because it comes
Again, everyone's
to
got their own range, but
I
yeah,
know it doesn't matter if you're accurate at that. It's a matter of if the deer is going to move between you shooting and by the time the arrow gets there, even if it's going really fast, it's still not a smart move. And
Yeah,
branches and
remember,
things like
targets
that.
don't move, deer do. So
Yep.
I don't care, like you can shoot a target at 100 yards and maybe you can hit all your bolts inside of a softball. That still doesn't mean an arrow should be flinging at an animal at 100 yards away, because by the time that bolt gets there, that thing can take 4 steps. So now where have you hit it? You know,
the
Mhm.
rump,
no
Yep.
telling. Yeah, somewhere not where you were aiming. That's for damn
right?
sure.
All right. Well, cool guys. Well, I appreciate your time, and we'll see you guys next time.
Safe hunting.
Good luck out
Yep.
there.
See you guys.
Nice.